So my session's entitled Teaching Through Crisis, Empowering Learners in Challenging Circumstances. And I noticed in the chat that one of the questions somebody asked was about how to support learners in these situations. So I'll be covering that really in depth. So I've been teaching learners from refugee backgrounds at City of Glasgow College since 2007. Can you see my screen now? Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, crystal clear.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I've been teaching students from all over the world for 15 years now at City of Glasgow College, and in that time I have seen a lot of a shift in the students and the locations that they've come from, and sadly that is dependent on the political situation, often where there's a war or where there's there's a reason for them to be displaced and to move to the UK for safety or to reunite with their family members. And in that time, when I first started, it was learners from Afghanistan, and then that shifted into Iraq, Congo, Syria, and now we're seeing more learners from the Ukraine. So it's about, as Ron said, that these situations have been happening for years. They will continue to happen. And it's about having a response in place for them and training ourselves to be able to not respond to them, but to be there and be ready for it. So we put together this series of Facebook Lives. So the Teaching Through Crisis National Geographic Learning is an open access website, which has teacher resources, so lessons on the move, which learners can do by themselves or in the classroom, and a teacher wellbeing hub, so lots of top tips and resources on teacher wellbeing and looking after yourself, because we need to look after ourselves as number one. And also these 9 professional development videos that you can do, all on 9 different topics. So we've got Paul Dummett, who's one of the authors of Keynote and Life, talking about teaching learners from refugee backgrounds. Generally, he teaches people from refugee backgrounds here in the UK, but also he teaches the Hands Up project, so learners, young learners in Palestine. Catherine Billsborough, who's one of the authors of Look, and she talks about introducing refugee topics into the classroom. So raising awareness in classrooms where maybe there aren't actually any people from refugee backgrounds, but you want to include it as a global issue. Laura Agbasso, who's in the top right there, she's got the dual perspective of being an ESOL learner, but also an ESOL teacher, not an ESOL learner, sorry, an ESOL teacher, but also she came to the UK as an asylum seeker in 2013. Then on the middle row on the left, we have Rania Dadul from Jordan, who teaches in a refugee camp in Jordan. Holly Geisen who teaches in Kenya, and Polly Ackhurst, who's based in Greece. In the middle, we have 4 amazing teachers from the Ukraine who talk about their experiences and how they continue to teach throughout as everything kicked off last year. And Alex Palinak talking about trauma on the right in the middle. And we've also got Emily Wilson talking about teaching in refugee camps in Greece, and Effie Tsuri talking about teaching young learners. And in the bottom right corner, we have Rosa Sally, who is a Glasgow girl. She's quite well renowned here, and she's a world changer. She has managed to end at the age of 15, she ended dawn raids for children by taking a case to the Scottish Parliament and fighting for it at the age of 15. And then she has done other amazing things, which I will tell you about later in the session. So I'll just start by sharing a clip from Kath's session, which I think really sums up the reason why we developed the Teaching Through Crisis series. And I think she says it very well. So here you go. Do let me know if you can't hear it. Please, I'll just put the volume up as high as it goes. Do let me know if you need it louder. Hold on.
All the time, sort of continuous thread, if you like, so that we're not just rushing in there, responding to some catastrophe, but instead we have what we need there ready, the resources, the ideas, the project or whatever, and we can use them. Maybe we can link them to other things that are happening, that we're doing in the curriculum, for example. So maybe if we're talking about, maybe if there's a unit in the course book on travel, that would be a good opportunity to bring in the other angle of people who are forced to travel, and just turning it on its head a bit and not waiting, to just jump in there, maybe in the middle of when they're learning about something else. So I think that's something we should consider. This is something that, is happening all the time, been happening for thousands of years. And, unfortunately, it will continue to happen, but we need to address it better and deal with it better and have ideas and understand it, things better, I think. So.
Okay, did everybody hear that okay? Because I do have quite a lot of video content, and so please let me know if you didn't, either in the chat or by turning your microphone on. So yeah, Kath basically summarised that very well. Teaching it throughout and incorporating it, just as we would, for example, important other topics such as the environment or like life skills, for example. You need to be including all of this within your curriculum and getting students to talk about it. It's great to do project-based learning on it. Kath has got some really lovely ideas within her session that she shares with us. So I would highly recommend watching it in all its entirety. And yeah, so she talks about how if you don't have students from refugee backgrounds, you can maybe, if you're going to be accepting students from refugee backgrounds soon, you want to be preparing your students for it in class, or maybe you just want to open their eyes to that as a global issue, then she's got some really lovely ideas on that. Oops. Okay, now is the moment of truth. I hope there is annotation tools enabled. If you can see you will at the top of your screen see a little bar that says you are viewing Emily Bryson's screen. It will green, and then there's a drop-down menu, and the drop-down menu will have annotation tools in it, I hope. If it does, can you please share what challenges you have in your classroom, or what challenges you think people who support in emergency situations or in times of crisis, what challenges might people face, or what would teachers face? Can you write using annotation tools, or if you can't, just write in the chat. I'm not sure entirely if sometimes it's disabled, sometimes annotation is disabled. The volume's really low, probably have to share side too. Okay, I'm gonna just reshare my screen because make sure that the sound's okay. Stop share screen.
Yeah, so I think people here can, share their answers or their ideas in the chat box.
Okay, thanks.
It'll be much better. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so guys, we're looking
share your
at
answers
the
to
chat
what
box at the moment.
Sorry?
Yeah. We're looking at the chat box at the moment.
Okay, great. Okay, so share your challenges in the chat box while I go through the challenge of making the sound louder. Yeah, things like teaching in poorer areas. So not everybody, I think often there's a perception that people have funds available to buy books, to buy computers. If you're maybe teaching in an area with that is less affluent, then maybe there won't be the same amount of resources, for example. And yeah, managing expectations versus reality. I think we were all when COVID hit, we were all in that challenge of how do we actually teach with without a classroom, for example. Yeah, language development and language dilemmas versus life dilemmas. That's a very important one. It does become complicated, and how do you deal with that exactly? But yeah, because a lot of the time students come to class and they're focusing on their life dilemmas. If their needs aren't being met, like some of my students come to class and they've been made homeless. They are fighting with the Home Office to get them to stay in the country where they are safe. They are trying to get their families over. So they're thinking about lots of different things. Language learning isn't necessarily their priority. Okay, so here is Laura Agbasso, who, as I mentioned, has the dual perspective of being she came to the UK as an asylum seeker and is now an ESOL teacher. She was a teacher in the Ukraine before then. And this is her experience, and this is the kind of thing that many of my learners have talked about. So here you go.
I am Laura.
Oh, sorry, I'll turn the volume up.
I'm originally from Eastern Ukraine. I moved to the UK in 2014.
No, sorry. I pressed the wrong button there. Okay.
I am Laura Agbasso, and I'm originally from Eastern Ukraine. I moved to the UK in 2014. My family and I, we had to flee the conflict in Eastern Ukraine.
Okay, the sound isn't clear. I'm going to turn on the subtitles. And hopefully you'll be able to read what she's saying.
I am Laura Agbasso, and I'm originally from Eastern Ukraine. I moved to the UK in 2014. My family and I, we had to flee the conflict in Eastern Ukraine. And that was the day when my life divided into two, a life before and life after. And it was, I think it was like beautiful time. I met a lot of people, beautiful views, nice, everything, but it was, I can say, the darkest time of my life. Everything changed. You're not you anymore. So during these dark times, I volunteered with, there was a bit of light for me. I volunteered with Red Cross. I was supporting classes, ESOL classes in Red Cross. And I did my master's in teaching English as a foreign language, to speak as a other language in Cardiff Metropolitan University and in the University of Leicester. And now I teach ESOL in college, and I work as a research assistant and mental health foundation.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't think the subtitles seem to work there actually. And they seem to work for me, but not for the video. So what Laura was saying, for those of you that the sound wasn't clear, was that when she moved to the UK, she had this feeling of life before and then life after. So it was kind of like before 2013 and after 2013, when I lived in Ukraine with my home country, or my new country, and how she was an English teacher in Ukraine, and now she's an ESOL teacher here in I think in Wales she's based, and she has done a master's in TEFL or TESOL, sorry, and she talks a lot about how she gets her students to she talks a lot about how she gets her students to lots of different activities for getting them to think about their lives and sharing their experiences, but also not to pry into their personal life too much, because there's a lot of things, and talking to them to find out what do they want to talk about and what is going to be difficult for them to talk about. Because a lot of my students and a lot of her students and a lot of students that have experienced trauma and difficult circumstances, there are some topics that they won't want to mention, like maybe for example, they might want to talk, there might be certain topics, for example, I try not to talk about like sometimes family can be quite triggering, because can you write about your family? Well, no, because many of them have died. They don't want to be talking about that, for example. So it's finding out what topics they want to talk about and what topics they don't want to talk about, and offering them options. So, for example, you might want to adapt and talk about, write about your friends, or write about your friends here in Scotland, or write about anybody. It doesn't have to be write about the specific topic, for example. But yeah, that particular session was amazing for giving a real background on how people feel when they come over. Okay, and then Paul Dummett has the perspective of a teacher and how are you happy with me to keep the subtitles on, these closed captions on, or are they distracting? Because I can turn them off. I know that Zoom has them enabled anyway. So Paul Dummett is one of the authors of Keynote and Life, and he talks about his experiences of teaching learners from refugee backgrounds. And well, this is what he says, and then I'll comment. If you can turn your own audio up as high as possible, I think that will help.
There's that whole sort of sense of instability they have, and I kind of that's the thing I felt most, I think, is just that thing of being maybe a constant in their lives, or a point of stability or something. I don't know, I've never asked them that, but I've always kind of tried to provide that, just to be sort of steady and calm and easy and patient and and warm.
Yeah, so for Paul, he talks about providing a constant in their lives. So the ESOL classroom and the English language classroom in general can become like a safe haven. It can be a little place where they go to escape and to like a welcome distraction in their lives. And when they come there, they've got friendly faces there, they've got a welcoming atmosphere, they've got teachers that really care for them. Yeah, and so these are some of the things that Paul talks about during his session. So firstly, make your classroom welcoming, which I think we all do naturally anyway as teachers. Be kind, and be compassionate, and be aware that some students might need a bit more flexibility. Some students might not attend for various reasons on certain days, and just give them the space to do that. Some students might need to sit alone or be distracted, for example, and that's okay. Just being aware that students might not perform 100% all of the time because they've got a lot of other things going on. Telling stories and supporting them, giving them opportunities to tell their stories, but again, not the personal, not necessarily the ones, letting them choose what stories they want to tell. Making connections and building a relationship between the teacher and the students and within the classroom as well. And supporting learners to be the best they can be and to achieve their goals, just like in any class, really. and injecting some fun. He used this phrase of injecting fun. So it just brings, bring fun into the classroom, because fun makes people learn, doesn't it? And it creates a nice safe space. Okay, and Alex Palinak is a researcher at Leicester University, and she is also an ESOL teacher, and she has lots of experience and has done lots of research onto teaching trauma experienced learners. Before she did her PhD, she was really reading up on it, and she was aware of a lot of ESOL learners came to class with PTSD, with mental health issues, but there wasn't a lot of research tying in education and trauma-informed practice. So her PhD was really on that and brought it, was really quite groundbreaking in a way, but to get information out there and to inform our practices. And this is a really weighty session. I think it's really, really worth watching, especially if you're teaching any learners with mental health issues or that have PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. It's great she covers a lot of information about the symptoms that they might have, how to teach them, the adaptations that you might make in class. And so here is her take on it. Here are her key takeaways, the final minute and a half of her session, where she summarizes the most important points.
It's important to have an idea of what to expect and to plan carefully around these issues beforehand, but thinking about certain topics and how you might deal with them. But also, we don't actually know at the end of the day what exactly might trigger what in which students. Yeah. Anything can be a trauma trigger. It could be a smell, it could be somebody's body language, it could be unanticipated things. So we need to kind of be very attentive and be willing to be responsive and flexible on the spot, basically. And most importantly, we just need to be kind, we need to be welcoming, we need to see and hear our students on a human level. We need to have empathy, we need to be supportive, and focus on relationship building and trust building in the classroom, and that will kind of set the foundation really for everything else. And one final thought. So, most teachers are not trained therapists. I'm not a trained therapist. I'm coming at this from a teacher's perspective as well. So I think there is a lot that we can do in the classroom to support our students kind of psychosocially with this stuff, to help to mitigate some of the effects of trauma and to help them learn and to help them with their well-being. But that there is always that boundary between teacher and therapist. And so we always need to be careful. We need to know the limits of our own agency, really, and our own role.
Yeah, and I think, so Alex there was basically talking about how, as teachers, there's only so much we can do. And Ron touched on this a bit as well, about how we are not counsellors, we are not psychologists, we are teachers. And we need to be aware that there are boundaries. We can help our students, we can signpost our learners towards support, but we can listen to them and we can help them, but we need to look after ourselves first and foremost. And to be able to, you need to put yourself first as well, and be aware that it can be. She talks a bit about sharing experiences with the other teachers in your class, with your colleagues. It's a good way to offload. It's a good way to get advice as well, and to get support. But yeah, I think of all the sessions, this really has a lot of content in it that is really, really. I feel like everybody should watch this one. If you're going to watch one, I think, well, this is really, really key. But yeah, I mean, watch all of them because they're all brilliant. But yeah, this trauma-informed practice one is different. It stands out, and it's necessary. So Polly Ackhurst, Holly Geisen and Rania Dadul teach in refugee camps in Jordan, Kenya and Greece. And they talk about, in their session, it's focused on ways of supporting learners when maybe you don't have the same amount of resources. And also when there's constraints such as maybe the people that you're teaching don't have visas to work in the country, they don't have access to certain education, they might not necessarily have access to university level education, they need to look at different routes and things that they can do. Also, they talk about facilitated learning rather than learning from a teaching perspective. So they support learners to be self-directed and autonomous and to teach themselves. They do a lot of peer learning. It's really wonderful session that I would highly recommend that you watch. And if you're also interested in teaching in refugee camps, Emily Wilson's session is focused on learning in Greece, in the Ilianos camp. And actually, when she was doing the session, the Ilianos camp was in the process of closing. So a lot of the people that were living in those camps were being rehomed. And she talks about the characteristics of teachers in refugee camps. And I'd like you to just, in the chat, what characteristics do teachers have? What characteristics do teachers in refugee camps need? What do you reckon? Yep, you're quite right. Compassion, thought, empathy, patience, kindness. Yeah. So it's not actually that different to what any other teachers, like basically all teachers need to be creative, I would say, be flexible as well. So as I mentioned before, just be aware that your learners might have different issues going on with themselves. So be flexible, be continuous learners, and learn and adapt every day. Be compassionate. I think many of you said compassionate. Be committed, and look after well-being not only of themselves but of the students, and put student well-being first. So actually one of the things that Emily Wilson did was she set up the Pandora project, which provides well-being support for people who are providing support to people in terms of crisis. So for example, if you're a frontline worker in a refugee camp, then the Pandora project will provide, for example, yoga or counselling for those projects. And if you'd like to get involved, you can get in touch with the Pandora project. All the links are on the Teaching Through Crisis website. Okay, and last year, well, when the Ukraine war kicked off, it was a horrible time, and these are particularly resilient teachers that I was amazed when I met these teachers, just how much they managed to achieve and do and support their learners and put their learners first and put themselves first as well, and get through and use teaching as a means of getting through. Using teaching and learning as a means of getting through challenging circumstances. So here Olga talks about how she was surprised that there was a scheduled class and she was surprised that actually everybody wanted to attend it. And this is what her thoughts were.
Nobody declined. You see the invitation. I knew that like people wanted is to have this lesson, and some of them were in Ukraine, some of them were like overseas. So, but still they had this intention, and why not? Because like as I told you, teaching is not about like only giving some tools, yes, giving some knowledge, yes, practices, but it's also about I think like giving people a chance to align with each other, who share the same pain, and to be together, yes, for a while, yes, to understand that they are not alone, yes, that they have support, that they have backup, yes, from their colleagues. So, and sometimes it's just like necessary for a person to splash the emotions that they have. So why not to do it in English? Yeah, so like you can practice, yes, your speaking skills, but at the same time, you get kind of like psycho.
Yeah, so she talks about how the English classroom kind of became like a kind of haven to for escapism, really. And then Julia has a very similar response here.
Currently we're having lessons more to unwind, more to get back to normal life. And actually I heard this idea from Olga, this drama, interacting drama, and I thought that one of the techniques that might be used that is shadowing. So when you take some piece of a film or a series, and your students just maybe not learn, but reading subtitles, try to be these characters. So that's maybe one of the ways how you can escape reality as well.
Yeah, so Julia talks about this idea of escaping reality. So again, bringing the classroom back to a means of escape and a safe haven and a place to get out of your own head and to get out of your own worries. So there's big things happening in your life, and as a student you can go into the English language classroom and you know that you're in a safe, welcoming environment where you've got friends, and you can talk about any worries if you need to, if you want to. And one of the final sessions was Suri talking about teaching learners from refugee backgrounds, teaching young learners, and she gave this really amazing activity from Anna Maria Pinter about identity texts. So basically students draw around their hand and create these little texts about themselves, and then they use creativity. So drawing is a very therapeutic activity, and by drawing in the classroom you can bring in you can help students to relax, and also so writing about themselves and their names and creating this wonderful little piece of artwork can be a real nice way of nice activity for the classroom. She also talks about doing this with t-shirts, drawing out a t-shirt as well. She's got some really lovely ideas for the language classroom. And I did this actually with my adult learners just a couple of days ago, and they absolutely loved it. So very nice activities. And finally, we've got Rosa Sally, who talks about standing up for refugee rights. So I'm aware of the time actually, and I'm aware also that the videos aren't playing as well as I would like them to. So I'll just tell you about it. Rosa is a Glasgow girl. So she, at the age of 15, with 6 other of her friends that were at Drumchapel High School, went to the Scottish Parliament and fought against basically stopped the Dawn raids. So at one point in time, Home Office vans would arrive and deport asylum seekers whose claims had been refused in the middle of the night. And this particular block of flats all stood together and stopped the Dawn raid vans coming into their houses. All the neighbours got together and said they didn't know where they were, etc. But basically, Rosa and her friends, who were also about 15 at the time, ended child detention in the whole of the UK. And then when she went to university, she went to the University of Strathclyde, and she basically started the university scholarship scheme, so asylum seekers could attend universities. And that has now been rolled out across the UK in many UK universities. So she really has changed the world, and she is a counsellor now in Glasgow. And she has some top tips for standing up for refugee rights. So I often thought that maybe signing a petition, what's that going to do? Well, actually, it does a lot. So she recommends signing petitions, going to rallies, writing to politicians, using your voice, and standing together. And not to forget that small steps turn into big changes. So she can really, what she says is really very inspiring. Yeah, she's an incredible person. Okay, I'm going to skip this section. I was going to ask you to write here or in the chat using annotation tools ways of making what is necessary for a good education, but I'm afraid we are running low on time, so I'm going to skip it and just basically say that we often teach learners who are not in ideal circumstances. We're not necessarily in a classroom. There were pictures of people during the Ukraine war under learning in subway stations. Some classrooms don't have walls, some classrooms don't have all the pens and paper or whiteboards or laptops, etc. So we've created this series of lessons, which we've called Lessons on the Move. And these lessons can be used anywhere for mobile learning. You can use them on your mobile phone. Students can use them in self-directed ways. They are ready to go, or you can use them in the classroom. And here's one that Andrew Tiffany did. And he's very expressive. So I think even if the sound doesn't work, you're going to get a lot out of this video regardless. There's also subtitles on it as well. Hurrah.
Let's talk about my friend. Do you know my friend? I don't know. Let me show you my friend. Okay, here's my friend. Oh, wait, hello, where is he? Spike, where are you? Oh, Spike is gone. I need to draw him for you. I need to draw Spike. Okay, so I have a pen, see? I can draw all over the screen, yeah? Okay, let's see. I can draw Spike for us. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna draw this one. It looks like a 6, doesn't it? Yeah, looks like a 6. Okay, and one more. Okay, and then what do they look like? Oh, they are his eyes. That's right. These are Spike's eyes. Yeah, and this one. What's that? That's his nose. Yeah, that's his nose. Okay, and then he has a.
Okay, so you get the idea. These are the kind of lessons that we have for students, which are really fun and they're really interactive. And look how enthusiastic Andrew Tiffany is. Isn't he amazing? Absolutely love this video. And there's whole loads of videos like this, like stories. We've got Alex Warner talking about how to use video, the National Geographic Learning photographs in class, which are incredible. So yeah, lots of free, and they're all free as well, free and ready to use. You can use them in any classroom. It doesn't necessarily need to be in terms of crisis, but it's there and it's ready if those challenging circumstances are arising. So we've got this teacher wellbeing hub as well, where there are lots of videos to support your wellbeing and student wellbeing too. And there's a lovely meditation by the wonderful Sarah Faulkner, which I don't think we've really got we've got time for. There's also suggestions of graphic novels and books that you can use in the classroom. These are some of my favorites. So yes, feel free to go to nationalgeographiclearning.com Teaching Through Crisis and check out all the resources. And we've got a little bit of time now for questions.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing with us today. And Emily, you know, both of us share a passion for graphic facilitation and graphic organizers.
Yes.
And so you mentioned a little bit about drawing in the classroom. And I just want to jump on that because like we both share this passion for drawing, and I love mind mapping as well. I just would like to say that it's really important just to deal with emotions, like you said, in the classroom. This is, we can't hide it. We can't run away from it. We do have to deal with that as teachers. But again, like you said as well, and I think I mentioned that as well, we're not psychologists.
No.
We're not trained therapists. But we can try to, from the basis of empathy, to deal with it. And Emily, what I do, and I think probably you do it as well, is bring a big giant box of markers and pencils and paper and just start with the simple question like I do. Yes, Emily, yes.
That's only one of them.
Yes, I always start with the simple question, which I learned from my mentor. I write it on the board. How are you feeling today?
Yes.
Just how are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just let them go with that, sort of use that as a driving question and tell them, you know what, instead of using words, let's draw how you feel today. And in any color you want.
Or different weather, different, like you can draw a cloud or a sun.
Yes. And then we can add words to it. And, we'll start teaching them language by, what are those feelings? What is that? What would you call that? What is it in English? And we're doing vocabulary with them. But, we're dealing with their real life situations in the classroom. So I think, it's like I said, we just share this passion for drawing. I love drawing, but I know I can't always be drawing in the classroom. But it's such a great opportunity to take drawing and graphic facilitation and creating some organizers, mind maps in the classroom and dealing with what's going on in their world. Yeah. It's really important. So thank you, Emily, for sharing that. And I have to say that, those drawings always lead to storytelling.
Well, they do.
Yeah, and people want to tell their stories. They want to share it. And, you mentioned many times, you sort of said that word a lot, and so did some of the videos, empathy.
Yeah,
but
empathy,
I think,
well-being.
Yeah, I think we never should confuse the word empathy with sympathy.
No.
Because, sympathy is almost in the direction of pity. And that's not what we want to share with our learners. We want them to know that we do care about them. Yes, it's true. I think that's really, really important. And let them tell their stories, share that with each other. But one last thing I want to say is to what you were saying, is why don't sometimes we take a project-based learning approach, to that and go beyond the classroom. If something's bothering them, like one of your speakers said, create a project to make other people aware. That helps them to work out their feelings and emotions, when they're dealing, as refugees. I know in my city here where I live at, we've taken in almost 2,000 refugees. And, we're always going over there, talking with them. I just sort of go over there and, I speak fluent German, so they don't speak German, but they do speak English. And they love coming to the little table where I'm sitting at. We're having sandwiches and coffee, and they're sharing. And that's important. Yeah.
And actually getting students out and about into the bigger world. Like, for example, what the refugee camp said was that getting them out and about and outside, if they can, if it's possible, can be very valuable to know the local community. Same as here in Glasgow, we like to get our students out volunteering. The students that go out and volunteer and meet the local community, they're the ones that learn English naturally. So it's creating opportunities for language acquisition, I would say.
Yeah, well, that's experiential learning. That's a true example of experiential learning. We take them to the museum. We take them to restaurants, to have, eat some German food, learn about the culture. Because this is going to be their new home. And we want to help them to integrate as soon as possible, as easy as possible. But thank you, Emily, for sharing that about how we as teachers do need to, deal with our students' lives and what's on their mind. This is really important, and it's going on all over Europe. I know that right now. in my little home city where I live at, it's not a big city, but we too are touched by all of those things, especially the earthquake in Turkey. 13% of the people who live in my city are Turkish. And so, this is really hitting home.
My students were really upset by that earlier in the week. They were really distracted. So it was something to bear in mind in my classroom, that they weren't 100%, because a lot of them were worried about what was happening.
I'm sure we have some questions for you from the audience, and so I'm going to turn that over to our moderator. What questions do we have from the audience to Emily?
Yeah, Summer, what are the questions and comments?
So as I see in the chat box, we have a lot of comments. People were really engaged with this session. Thank you so much, Emily. So the first question is from Mr. Ahmad. He says that one of the challenges that he had was that during the time of crisis, students would ask, how am I going to progress, or what is the purpose of me getting into classroom and learning while everything around is putting me down?
I think a lot of that is maybe take the pressure off the progress aspect. I think in many ways, English in terms of crisis moments becomes, as like Julia and Olga said, as Julia and Katerina said, more of a kind of safe haven, or a way of getting away from it. So maybe instead of focusing on progress, focus on the language classroom being something that you enjoy, something that takes you away from your traumatic experiences, and maybe take the pressure off the progress and focus on just enjoying the learning experience, if possible.
Okay, good. I'm going to ask you another question. The rest of the questions will be answered in the conference magazine, okay? So the second question is from Eunice. He's asking how to teach in poor areas where students lack the basic needs. Some students would have been second Einsteins if they had the chance. Okay,
so a lot of that is kind of, I guess, trying to find opportunities for them. And teaching with very minimal resources. So one of the things that I love doing is with graphic facilitation, for example, all you need is a pen. Like those two activities, the activity of the person pushing the boulder up a hill, that's like a good way of getting students to think about challenges. The thought bubble is a good way of getting them to think their thoughts, and there's no preparation in that. There's no resources needed in that other than a pen and a bit of paper or a whiteboard. So if you've got minimal resources, graphic facilitation is a great way of reaching students with that. It's also a really fun way of doing it. The resources on National Geographic Learning's Teaching Through Crisis site as well are great, because there's lots of mobile, they're available on mobile phones, if they have Wi-Fi, of course. And National Geographic Learning have quite a lot of activities as well that can be printed out.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Yes.